Imagine you're renting an apartment. Your stuff is in it, your documents, your photos, your private letters. But the landlord, who lives in another country under different laws, has a master key, and his government can legally demand they hand it over at any time without telling you, without your consent. Now imagine that landlord is Amazon or Microsoft or Google, and the apartment, that's Canada's data. Storing your data on Canadian soil does not automatically mean it's protected by Canadian law. If the company managing that data is American, even if the servers are sitting in a building in Mississauga, the US government can reach in and grab it under something called the Cloud Act. No warrant or notification required. They can just take it. So when politicians talk about digital sovereignty, a lot of people tune out. It sounds like pretentious bureaucratic filler. Sounds like something that matters just to like lawyers and IT departments and not regular people. But what it actually means is this: who controls the systems that run your country? Who governs the infrastructure that processes your health records, your tax information, your national security communications? And if it's not Canada, if it's a foreign owned platform operating under foreign laws, what does that actually mean for us? That's what we're getting into today. Canada's digital sovereignty policy is built on one central idea: control, not isolation. The federal government isn't saying Canada should build a digital wall and cut itself off from the world, because that's not realistic. What they're saying is that critical Canadian data, infrastructure, and AI capabilities need to be governed on Canadian terms, not American terms, not China's, not anyone else's. Here's something that you should know. Approximately two-thirds of software used by Canadian institutions is controlled by companies subject to legal authority in the United States. That means our hospitals, our universities, our government departments. They're running on software where a foreign government has potential legal leverage. And about 60% of Canadian cloud infrastructure relies on foreign owned providers. We are not operating on our own systems. We are tenants, and we don't fully control the lease. In my years working at international organizations, we struggled with how to adopt cloud technology. We could enter agreements with companies like Amazon or Microsoft to make our servers an extension of the property that the organization is located, which in theory would make it as diplomatically protected as a diplomatic bag. But with legislation such as the Cloud Act, that wasn't deemed inviolable. The safest option was to house our data on servers located in our building, but that isn't efficient either. Now, to be fair, Canada is doing something about this, and some of it is pretty significant. Two major initiatives have recently shifted the conversation from policy talk to real investment. The first is called AI for All, a national strategy focused on AI governance and making Canada a serious player in the artificial intelligence development. The second is the Sovereign AI Compute Strategy, which is Canada's largest ever investment in domestic supercomputing infrastructure. Billions of dollars, public money going into building the computational backbone that a sovereign AI future requires. Because here is what you have to understand about AI. If you don't have the computing power, you don't have the capability. And if you don't have the capability, you depend on someone else's. And if you depend on someone else's, they set the rules. In our analysis, we noticed something that is one of the most important pieces: Indigenous data sovereignty. Canada recognizes that Indigenous communities have a distinct and separate governance framework for their own data, rooted in something called the OCAP principle: ownership, control, access, and possession. And this is not a footnote. It's a recognition that digital sovereignty isn't just a national question. It's also a question of who within a nation gets to determine how their information is used and by whom. So, what are the gaps? The procurement system has a blind spot. Existing Buy Canadian policies don't always distinguish between companies that are actually Canadian owned versus foreign owned companies that simply have a Canadian office. And that's a meaningful difference. A Microsoft Canada office is not a Canadian company. it's a branch, and the legal exposure is the same. There's also a significant legislative gap. Canada had two major pieces of legislation in development, the Consumer Privacy Protection Act and the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act, and both were abandoned. So, right now, while Canada has strategic vision, it doesn't yet have the legal infrastructure to enforce it. Policy without law is just telling people how you plan on doing things. And then there's this weird paradox. Canada is trying to become more sovereign while simultaneously relying on foreign hyperscale providers, the Amazons and Microsoft and Googles of the world, for the investment and technical capacity to do it. And that's not hypocrisy. It's a real tension that anyone designing a realistic sovereignty strategy has to grapple with, because domestic capability isn't built overnight, that you have to be transparent about the dependency while you're building. So, where does this leave us? The real shift here is from thinking about sovereignty as a question of geography, where are the servers, to understanding it as a question of governance, who controls what happens on them. Locating servers inside Canadian borders doesn't protect Canadian data if the company running them is subject to foreign law, just like in my earlier example working for international organizations. What actually protects Canadian data is strong encryption, independent auditability, domestic compute capacity, and procurement rules that look at who truly owns the compute and controls the system, not just where it's incorporated. Canada's digital sovereignty is also going to depend on whether it can reduce that reliance on foreign technology ecosystems without giving up innovation, competitiveness, or global connectivity. That's a hard needle to thread, but it's also the right problem to be solving. What do you think? If you found this video helpful, please like it and consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.